Windows Server 2019 Server Administration Part 2 of Day 1. Welcome back everyone. Myself Prakash Pradhan. I am trainer for your entire series of the Server 2019 Server Administration. In Day 1 we have discussed about the editions of this Windows Server 2019 and its physical requirement, the features that we're having in all the three editions of Windows Server 2019. Without wasting your time further, in this session we are going to jump up straight promoting your Windows Server 2019 standard edition into the domain controller. Number one, of course, we'll have to prepare for certain preparation like assigning the IP, changing the name of your server, this domain PC. So many things are there which I'm going to show you step by step. And apart from this, after promoting your Windows Server 2019 standard edition into a domain controller, we are going to test ourselves by joining one of the client as a member or the client PC of your domain controller, so that we can check at the same time whether the Active Directory is functioning properly or not. Okay, for that purpose I have made a few preparation over here. The name of our domain is going to be wiretech.co and the IP address that I'm going to use is a class C, class full IP. I hope you all have a knowledge on this, because I guess without having a IP concept, the journey of server will be incomplete. I might say in some sort it would be a bit difficult to understand. So that's why if you have less knowledge about the IP, subnet marks and all, so I suggest you please go through it. You can find so many tutorials over the cloud. So over here, since I have used a class C, class full IP 192.168.1.1, that's why the subnet marks is going to be 252.2.0. and obviously since this PC itself, this operating system that I'm going to use a IP as a 192.168.1.1 itself is going to act as a domain controller, so its IP is also going to be same thing. So let's start. After this, this is my actually domain controller PC. That means it's a server. Here I have installed my server operating system. It's a Windows Server 2019 standard edition. Okay, if you would like to see, or if you'd like to make sure that this PC is standard edition or not, I'd like to show here. See, this is a 2019. It's actually standard edition, and I have assigned 1 GB RAM for, since I'm working in this virtual environment, and the name of this PC I have given as a DC1. And don't forget, whenever you promote any server operating system as a domain controller, the first thing that you need to do is to choose a proper name. There are many reasons for giving a good name or certain name that should have some sense. For example, if I promote this PC along with the domain controller as a CS server, don't forget, in a CS server you will not be able to change the name of your PCs. So keeping all these things in my view, I have given this name, and I believe everybody knows to change the name. Just go to the change, and just simply change the name. Everybody knows this. So right now we are in a workgroup environment, and in order to test the connectivity, I do have another one PC installed over here. Okay, that one I do have here as a client. So I would like to show you that this is the client PC. Over here Windows 10 is installed and IP configuration is already done over here, because I'm going to use it as a client. So if you see over here, IP configuration is the 1.2. so I have not done anything else. So have a look. This is simply IP setting is done. Okay, 192.168.1.2, and there is no DNS, there is no gateway, there is no alternate DNS, there is nothing. Just a simple IP configuration is done for IP version 4. If you see here, see, simple. There is nothing to get confused. But our prime concern over here is to set up the configuration in the domain controller, and that one is here. This is my client PC, and I would like to take you to my server. Okay, here's the server, this one. So if I would like to show you the IP configuration of this PC, see, this one is 1.1. so now since I'm going to promote this PC as a domain controller itself, I need to bring a slight change in the DNS configuration of this PC itself, this operating system I mean to say. I don't need to use any gateway right now for using internet or just forwarding my any packet, because I am going to treat this server as a simply domain controller. So that's why my domain IP with going to be the same thing, 1.1. And we don't have alternate DNS since it will be acting as a first DNS in our domain environment. So domain IP configuration is done. In a client 1.2 is already given. So let's test the connectivity with that client PC. Okay, fine, it's done. So it can communicate with the client PC 1.2. That means that client PC 1.2 would be also able to communicate with 1.1. Otherwise we fail our objective. Fantastic, it's done. Now, before you promote your server operating system standard edition 2019 as a domain controller, there is one more thing that you need to do. What you need to do over here is you need to add the roles over here. I need to add one role. Let's go to server manager. You can drag it into your task manager as well. Just to pin it, it will save your time rather than going to start menu all the time. So now it's going to load your server manager. We are opening first time the server manager in order to add some roles in your standard edition in order to promote it as a domain controller. So here we go. Initially when you click the server manager, it takes time. That means few seconds it will take. So this duration is actually known as the initial configuration test. It does certain testing itself, testing the roles and features that's been installed in this server operating system that it is supposed to give the services. Now, if I go to tools over here, still the things are being loaded. Okay, if I go to the tools menu over here, you see these are the roles and features that is being installed over here. But our prime concern over here is we need to add a role for your Active Directory domain services. It's a role base, it's not from the remote. This is the IP, the name of my PC. So what am I going to do over here actually is I'm going to add a one role so that this server operating system will act as a domain. Okay, this is my IP, this is the name of my PC, my edition of the server family operating system. Now what I need to install right now is only one role. Active Directory domain services, and when I click this, associated some of the other roles will be added automatically, for which you don't have to worry. Just this, then click next, done. It's so simple. So this means only the role has been added to your tool. Okay, but this has to be configured now. If you do not configure after adding Active Directory domain services role, this operating system will not act as a server, or it will not act as a domain controller. It will simply be working as a workstation like we had Windows 10 operating system. Simple that. Okay, so it's loading over here. It takes time. Actually, I'm using my virtual machine. That's why it's taking a bit more time, bit longer. In your physical environment, it will not be taking that much long. So it's saying that view installation progress. Okay, freezer installation started. You see over here it's installing. Have a patience on this. You see here Active Directory role is not added so far since it's loading. That means it's installing. After that, it's going to be listed over here. By the time, if you notice over here, one notification is already done. That means we are actually adding. That's why it's showing. Okay, now this server role has been added for Active Directory domain services. Now you can see over here, you can simply close it. But as soon as this installation was done, or it shows that configuration is required over here, just notice over here, the yellow exclamation has arrived over here. That means the role is been added, but it is not configured yet. That means this server operating system is yet to be configured in order to act as a domain controller. So that's why it's saying over here, promote this server to a domain controller. If I go to the tools over here, at this moment, you see a few things are added. Active Directory users and computers is being added. Okay, not only this, other things are also added. But if I click over here, in order to see any object of this Active Directory domain services, trust me, it's not going to show anything. Why? Only the role has been added. The configuration is still yet to be done. That's why it's saying over here. So go over here and click promote this server to a domain controller. Now, the first thing, it is going to ask you over here, select the deployment operation. That means there are three operations over here. Add a domain controller to an existing domain. This is not our point. That means we do not have any existing or pre-created or pre-existed domain in our environment. So in that case, add a domain controller to an existing domain is useless for us. Number two, add a domain controller to an existing forest. We do not have forest either, because this is the first forest that we are going to create. So that's why I'm going to click add a new forest. Now here, you need to give a name of your domain. Like we have already discussed, the name will be viatech.co. Okay, you can give any name you want as per the name of your organization. viatech.co is the name of my domain. That will be the root domain. Why it's saying the root domain? Because this is the first domain in a forest that will be treated as a root domain. Now, after that, it's saying the forest functional level and domain functional level. The forest functional level is 2016. If you see over here, there are others as well. Of course, 2003 has been removed. Forest functional level, domain functional level, we can use the older functional level also from here. You can select it any, but what you need to understand, once you select any forest or domain functional level older version, okay, you can upgrade it to the new one. But if you have selected to the latest one, you will not be able to go back. Some of the features in your server environment will depend upon the forest functional level and domain functional level. Of course, you don't have to worry about this. Normally during the installation, we leave it as it is. Okay, but you need to understand, if any of your server pre-existed servers in your network environment existed with the older versions of this older version of operating system, you need to be careful. So right now it is the first forest in our entire network, entire domain infrastructure. So that's why I'm gonna leave it as it is. Now, specify domain controller capabilities. Over here, domain name system, of course, this is going to act as a DNS now, and the global catalog is going to be the first domain in a forest. And we are not going to talk about the read-only domain controller, because the domain we're going to create over here will be the read-write, so that you can create any object, you can delete, you can modify, you can do whatever you want in your new domain in your forest environment. And it is asking you directory service restore mode password. This is required when we try to recover any object, which we'll discuss in a days to come. Okay, so I'm going to use it the same password that I gave for the domain. What if you forget this? Don't worry, system administrator can reset this password also. Okay, now after this, it's saying a delegation for DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found. Of course, we do not have anything. It's the first domain in a forest. So simply click it next. Now it's going to show you the net bias name, and don't forget the net bias name will be the first portion of your domain name. That means in our case it will be Viatech, not co. That will not come. See, if I go back previous, let's go one more step. Viatech.co is a root domain name, and when I come to this level, and it's saying my net bias name is the first part of your domain name. That means before the period, before the dot. After that, after verifying that this name is not being used anywhere, these are the three folders that is going to be created in your first forest. It's saying in a C drive, Windows entities, one directory will be created. Of course, I'm talking from the CUI point of view, and we call it folder that I know. So over here, the one folder has been created. What it does, it's a database. We are creating, or we are promoting this operating system into a domain controller. So what it does, it creates the objects. So object has an entity, it has a detailed information like the name, password, detailed history is there. So it is going to maintain the database folder for your objects as well in an Active Directory domain controller. So that's why it's going to create one folder to maintain that database of your objects. Second one, log file for folder. Of course, we don't come across certain circumstances that we need to go through the certain log file to overcome certain errors. Okay, and the next one is saying sysvol folder. This sysvol folder has something to do with the group policy. Of course, these things we are going to discuss in the days to come. So right now, when you install, just promote your server operating system into a domain controller, you can leave all of these folders address or the location, I mean to say, as it is. What if you want it to change? Of course, you have a right to do that. You just select the folder, or I mean to say the path. You see, any path you choose, it is up to you. So right now I'm going to leave as it is. It's better to leave it as it is over here. And then it's showing you your review, whatever settings that is being done right now in order to promote the server and operating system as a domain controller. So it's a first domain now. So after this, obviously it's going to take a few minutes to configure all this. If you remember last time when I select these tools and try to click Active Directory users and computers, it was showing certain errors. Now because other elements were not installed now, so it's showing all of this. Would you like to go for it? Obviously. Okay, prerequisite is checked. That means it's completed. That means whatever prerequisite was there in order to promote this operating system as a domain controller, that is been checked by itself and it's okay. This means okay, go for it now, install it. Now it's going to install all the roles, okay, all the options. It's going to create all the folders that we have seen, you know, sys folder, database, okay, entire things are going to be installed. It takes few minutes, just bear with me. If you see carefully over here, it's creating directory partition. Okay, your domain name is being registered over here, including the objects that is required over here in order to promote this operating system as a complete domain controller. Okay, objects are being created, folders are being created, domain components are being created. Entire things are done now. It's almost done. You know, these are the things that you need to see carefully. Normally what happens whenever we promote any server operating system as a domain controller, we see some tutorials, we see some steps given in a book, and we simply click next. That's a habit. Okay, when I was a learner, almost let's say 15 to 20 years back, I used to do the same thing, and later on I used to come across so many errors because I never went through all these steps. What I was taught, click next, and we did the same thing, but I suggest you not to do that. Okay, you need to honestly, it's saying this Kerberos policy also, it is used for the authentication actually. Of course, these things we are going to learn in detail. Okay, now see, it says now this server was successfully configured as a domain controller. Now once any server family operating system is being configured as a domain controller, it has to be restarted. Okay, in order to function properly. So that's why we have to bear it for a few minutes, because it has to get started now. It's restarting. Okay, now by the time, how about testing through other PC in order to make sure that this domain controller is being promoted successfully or not, because we do have a one client machine over here. Okay, let's see in this client machine. Okay, but don't forget, in between the server is being restarted. 192.168.1.1, that's a domain. Okay, see, it's replying. That means it's waken now. That means if I do over here bring vitcs.co, what do you say? Will it answer? Definitely it is not going to answer it back, because in our NIC configuration of this PC, the DNS IP address is not being assigned, because we have not prepared this computer in order to join that domain controller. Now if you see over here, see, it's blank, it's empty. If I give over here preferred DNS 1.1, now probably it should be able to resolve that name into IP and IP into name. If you go for both forward lookup zone and reverse lookup zone. So let's try it now. Okay, if the server is restarted, it will respond. It's not done, that means we still have time. See, it's restarting now. That's why. So let's wait for a few minutes. By the time, keep on trying over here from the client student, that means client PC. No, it's still taking time, because the server is not started yet. Here one more thing that you need to notice is normally when you install operating system and restart, it boots faster. Okay, but every time the more roles you are going to add it, the load is going to be shown via the booting process itself. That means it takes time. That means in order to boot your PC faster, in order to boot your server faster, you need to make sure its configuration is bit high, because right now I am using my virtual operating system. I am using all the settings in a Hyper-V and with the minimum assignment of RAM and the processor, so that's why it's taking time. But in a real world, it will work faster, because for the server, I don't think we're going to use any PC that has a configuration of saying your client PC actually. So that's why server has a higher price. That's why it has a feature. That's why. Now it's showing, see over here, applying security policy to the system. You might be wondering over here what security policy we have applied in a server. That's why it's showing over the screen. You don't have to worry about that. When you install, or when you promote a server as a domain controller, one default policy will be installed or loaded by your operating system itself. Okay, I'm going to log in for the first time. It shows the Viatic now. Okay, it's loading the profile. So by the time, as I was saying, let's try it from the client PC. Still not done, so we'll see. We might have made some mistake in the name of the domain as well. So let's try for that first. Let it boot completely. Okay, now Our server seems to be ready. Okay, still ICT is taking place. I think I have already informed last time only that when you turn on your PC, okay, when you add the roles and features, it takes time because it has to be loaded, and this time frame, this period is known as ICT. So that means initial configuration test. Okay, Active Directory, some of the items are still yet to be loaded, so that's why it's taking time. By the time, if I go to start, okay, server manager is being loaded now. Okay, now if I go to server manager, okay, it's loading. You need to have patience when you learn the server, because some of the settings it requires time, some of the settings it requires rebooting. Sometimes you need to wait for a few seconds or maybe a few minutes. But as a human nature, you know, tendency, we are always in hurry. That doesn't work with the server. It takes time. So if I go to Active Directory users and computers over here, remember last time after adding the role, it was showing error because it was not promoted into the domain controller. Now if I go to Active Directory users in this computer, it is going to show me the information about the name of my domain. Okay, and if I have any objects, it's going to show the objects as well. Okay, see, this is the first interface showing of our domain controller. So the name of our domain is viatech.co. So if I print myself, that means if I ping myself by using this name, in order to make it sure that name to IP resolve is been done or not, let's say .co, viatcs.co. It should reply viatcs. Oh, just a second. viatcs.co is the name of our domain. See, it's replying. That means our work is done now. This PC is being promoted as a domain controller and it is able to resolve name to IP, because the main concept of promoting a server file operating system as a domain controller, the one prime concern over here is actually to resolve name to IP. Okay, now if I go back to my one of the client PC which I was talking about over here, Windows 10, ping viatcs.co. See, now successfully the name is being able to resolve into the IP. That means we have successfully installed, okay, server 2019, okay, and we have also successfully promoted that server 2019 into the domain controller. So if I go to tools and I go to DNS, because it does a name to IP resolving work, if I go to DNS and I expand a bit over here, you see we have used the forward lookup zone, not the reverse lookup zone. This is the name of my domain. Okay, and the first domain itself will be counted as a host. If I go back to Active Directory users and computers, it will show you the actually objects that is being created, pre-created for us. If I go to the users, see, these all are the users and the groups that's been created. It's pre-created, having certain objectives, you know, certain motives are there. If I go to this computer section over here, it shows 0. But if I go to domain controller, my domain PC name will be listed over here. See over here, because this is the first domain. So over here in computers, none of the names are going to be displayed. Why? The name of computers will be displayed over here only after if any client PC joins your domain controller. That means if I go to my client PC over here, this is my Windows 10 and I would like to join it to the domain controller. Okay, let's see, the IP is already configured. We have successfully configured 1.1 is the domain. Okay, this configuration is required from the client side. Now if I wanted to join this PC to the domain controller, okay, so let's join it now. It will be easy for us, and it will be clear also that we did all the setting at the same time. So I would like to change this work group, local work group, to the domain controller. See, now I am going to join a domain. So name of my domain is viatech.co. okay. See, anyone has a right to join their workstation into the domain controller, but what they need to understand is the authority. They need to have authority. Okay, now over here, if we are successfully able to ping it, and let's say viatech.co. okay, if it shows this kind of error, no need to be panicked. First, let's go to the IP configuration of this PC. In IP configuration of this PC, what I need to do is I need to write the DNS IP into the NIC. That is not done so far in this PC. See, this is my workstation. If I go back, okay, 1.1 DNS is done. Let's give the gateway also the same thing. Okay, DNS is also alternate, we don't have, so we give the same thing. Now if I now if I go here, it's okay. If I ping domain, okay, it's showing successfully ping. Now we need to join it into the domain controller. Okay, just a second. Now we are going to change the name or the work group into the domain. Change it into a domain. viatech.co. Now it will ask you the domain authentication. See, it's asking you what you need to understand over here. It's asking you the domain credential. That means any workstation, any desktop, any laptop that you bring in your organization, if you know the domain IP, you can simply register it over here. But before doing that, you need to have authentication via the domain administrator. That means illegally workstation cannot be joined into a domain environment. So I need to give username of the domain and the password of the domain itself. Do not be confused. This password is not from my local workstation. It is from the domain. Of course, using a local administrative privilege, you can disjoin from the domain, but you cannot join it into domain, because we all know that every operating system, desktop, laptop, whatever device you use, there is a one local administrator can simply, you can disjoin it from the domain. So it's saying that you have successfully joined into viatech.co domain controller, but for that, for completing an entire process, you need to restart. Now, what I was saying last time, okay, I need to restart. There is no other way. Now, this PC is being joined as a client in a domain controller. But if I come to my root server, okay, if I come to my main domain, okay, last time, if you remember, in these computers, there was nothing, because I told you no computers were joined in a domain environment. Now, if I refresh it, the name of that client PC should display immediately. See. Means now we have successfully registered one client as a member of your domain. So that means this objective of today's class, creating a one domain controller or promoting your server standard edition into a domain controller is successfully done. We have used this IP as a IP of the domain controller, and this is the same IP that is used for the DNS. I hope the thing what we did today was bit informative to you, and I believe that you learned something. So in between, if you have any queries, if you have any question, you can see my mail address prakash.pradhanmct1@gmail.com. You can simply write a mail, and if possible, okay, I'll try to reply back as soon as possible. Okay, thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you.